Okay, my YouTube people. Today in Rap's Garage Shop, I'm going to be working on a Hydro Gear hydraulic pump. This is for an Exmark professional stand-on 52-inch cut mower. Part number is PG-1HQQ-DA1X-XXXX. There's two of these on the mower, one for each wheel. I make sure to have the schematic diagrams. I also have the manual for this. I'll have to get the manual out. Let me say this about rebuilding pumps. If you're not going to flush the entire system because they share the same hydraulic oil tank, and you're not going to flush the lines, you may as well not rebuild them at all, because there's generally metal in the whole system if you're having an issue, and there's probably some metal somewhere in the system that you want to get out. If you rebuild your pumps and that metal winds up in there, you're right back to where you started. So if you're not going to flush the system, don't even bother to rebuild the pumps. Anyway, I hope you enjoy this video. I did buy the bearing rebuild kit for both these pumps. The part number for that is 50551. I also bought all the O-rings and seals, and these are both made by Hydro Gear. I try to stick with OEM parts where I can, and the part number for this kit is 70525. I would consider these pumps relatively easy to take apart and rebuild. You also want to mark them so that you get things lined back up where they're supposed to be. And you want to get good pictures so when you're all said and done that these fittings and the other fittings that are on this face the right direction. Plus, it's important to get all this linkage back in the right position and the right order. The pump's underneath this cover, and it's important when you take this apart that the gears are in a specific way. They'll usually have a dot on them, and that dot either faces up or faces the case, and you want to take notice of that. Now, I'm not sure if somebody's been in this pump before or not, and I'm hoping that they haven't. The reason I'm going into these pumps is because one was leaking pretty good, so I'm just going to reseal them both up. Neither one was making any metal, which is really good, so I suspect that when I get into these that there shouldn't be any major issues, but you never know. First thing I'm going to do is pull the linkage off this side, and then I'll start pulling this apart a little further. This down here is 6mm. So this had red Loctite on it, washer. Now this piece, this is spring loaded with this spring. So when I go back together, I'll probably have to take that spring off to get it back together. This down here is 1/4 inch. I'm not sure why they mix metric and standard up, but they did. I believe this adjustment is for the creep. So if your machine's creeping, you take this apart and you give us a little adjustment one way or the other, and then that'll allow it not to creep while it's in neutral. There's also a plastic bushing in here. I can see there's a seal under there. So one of the things I do is put marks on it so that I get everything back in the right order. I just take an automatic center punch, and I'm going to put one punch mark there, one there, and then I'm going to put one here. If I was taking both of these apart at the same time, I'd put two on the other one not to get pumps mixed up. First thing I'm going to do is pull the actual oil pump off of this. These are 5mm. Okay, so I take this one off. Okay, I have a spring here, and that holds a check ball in here. I can see that. On these gears, the round one has the dot facing up, and this dot was facing down, so I'm assuming that someone was in it before, because those dots should be facing the same direction. You can see the dot right here on this one. The dot was facing the pump housing. Okay, gears out. I don't like to make final determination on these gears until I clean them really good. But if you look, this gear, there's no scratches on the outside, and I don't see any scratches whatsoever on the inside. The same with this inner pump gear. Out on the outside edge of this lobe, they'll have scratches if there's problems, and this one looks really good too. And then the other spot you have to check is the outside of the pump here, and there's no scratches in that. nor is there any scratches down here. So this pump is in immaculate condition. Would make sense to say that somebody's was in here and they must have did some work, or it was well maintained. So that's good to see. In this housing, you can see there's a check ball right there. There's that check ball. It seems like it's a plastic check ball. I'm just going to put that right in the pump. I'm also going to put this spring with the pump that holds the check ball in. Before I go any further, I'm going to bag this stuff up right now. And I'm also going to bag the 2 screws that held it in with it. That way I don't lose any of these parts. So I put the pump in the bag, I put the 2 screws in the bag, and I'm even going to put the O-ring in the bag. That way, when I go to replace it, I'll know what the O-ring should look like, just in case for some reason it's not in the kit. Now, these machine surfaces normally don't get gaskets because that O-ring is your sealing surface. So when you go back together, you have to make sure that this is really clean. You don't want to hit it with any kind of powered equipment, like a wire wheel or a cookie on an angle grinder or something like that. The best way I found to clean these is with a razor blade, and you want to get a nice sharp razor blade. You just come along here, you go easy and slow, and you just take that dirt right off of there like that. When you're done, you can get a little Scotch-Brite and clean it up. And then you have to clean it again real good after you use the Scotch-Brite. Next thing I'm going to do is take these 4 10mm bolts out. And there's the springs lifting this up and off. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. It helps my channel. Doesn't cost you anything. You just go down there and hit that like button. And also there's the notification for when my videos come out. You can always tap on that. I appreciate it. So there we go. I see there's 2 dowels, alignment dowels, one here and one stayed in the pump. You can see on this wear plate has a few very light marks, but there's no gouging in that. I can't even catch my fingernail on any part of that. So that's in real good shape. This side says up, so I guess when you're installing it, it would be this side down and that side faces up. There's the gasket. And then there's these bearings that I bought new to replace. This looks to be in excellent condition. So these pumpers look to be in excellent condition. The shaft is also in excellent condition. So I'm really happy to see all this. This is how the machine puts oil to one valve or the other, is this rocks back and forth and diverts the oil. And then this just comes right out like that. And then there's a little square on here. The other thing that wears is these black bearing surfaces down here. And if you look, they're in excellent condition too. This wasn't the pump that was leaking, so I'm happy about all this. Now this seal has to come out. There's a snap ring here and you take the seal out. And I believe there's a nut under there that you have to take off. And then the shaft just comes right out. Now I'm just going to take these pins out, and it's very light. I barely had to put anything on those. There's also a washer that goes on this spring. This washer goes on the bottom side of this spring, so it protects the spring and holds it on this shaft. There's a step on the shaft that the washer sits on. So I'm going to take and clean all this real good, of course. Now I'm going to take his snap ring out. Okay, snap ring came out nice and easy. Now pop this seal out. I do have seal pullers, but sometimes it's just easier to use a screwdriver. And try not to break your screwdriver. You want to be careful while you're doing this, not to hurt the aluminum. Okay, there's the seal out, nice and easy. I do not have a replacement bearing for that one, but it's rolling very smooth, so I'm not worried about it. I don't really feel any play. That bearing comes out this direction. Oh, like that. Okay, there's the whole thing. I'm going to keep that bearing clean, but I am going to clean all this, and then I'll re-lube the bearing, And I'll also take some Scotch-Brite and just clean off this dirt off this shaft, whatever doesn't come off. Also, here's the directional shaft. It come right out of there, no problem. I'll make sure in the kit that it has this funky locking ring and that seal before I take it out of there. I'm sure that it does. This funny locking ring's in the kit along with the seal right there, so I'll be taking these out. Again, just get under it with a screwdriver and it just pops up that easy. The seal, I always just get a screwdriver and just turn it a little under there. Again, you want to be very careful not to damage any aluminum. And there it is out. And no aluminum was hurt in the removal of the seal. I'm going to leave all these fittings in, but I will wash this out real good so I can get this clean. I am going to remove the plugs. I'm going to leave all the fittings in. Alright, these seem like they don't want to come out. I don't know if I'm going to take them out. I don't know if I feel like getting in the heating them to get them out. So what I'll do in this case is I'll look on the schematic to see if there's anything behind them. And if there is, then I'm going to take them out. There does appear to be. Get this one out. You just put a screwdriver in there and then it screws right out. This one releases the hydros. If you want to wheel the machine without having it running, the tires won't turn unless you back this off. And you can see that has an O-ring, but there's nothing behind it except for the O-ring, and this pointed needle is what seals it. I can see on the schematic that there's nothing behind this one, so I'm going to leave that in. It does appear that there's something behind this one, so I am going to have to get it out. And there's nothing behind this one, so I'll probably leave that one in. And also this one. Okay, now to get everything nice and clean. So I've decided I want to get these out and see what's behind them and make sure everything's clean. I'm going to use a little heat to do that. Alright, I decided to move on to this one because the other one's not coming out. I put some heat on it and now it comes right out and there's nothing behind it. I will spray some brake clean in there to make sure it's clean. It does have an O-ring right there that I'll replace. Now I'll see if I can get this one out. Doesn't seem like this one's coming out either. This block's pretty hot, so I guess I'm going to leave it go for now. So on this block, I was able to get this one out. And that's this here. It has an O-ring behind it. I'll replace that O-ring. I was not able to get this one out. I was able to get this one out, but not this one. So both of these black ones, I guess it's like steel to aluminum, and they're not coming out. And I don't want to drill it. I don't want to get into drilling it. I don't believe there's anything that's behind them that's important. And then the other thing is the ones I did get out were spotless. I did clean this in solvent, and I'll also wipe it down with some brake clean. But you can see it's very, very clean, so I'm going to go with what it is. One of the things I like to do is anytime I have a flat surface, I like to go over it with a flat file just to make sure that nothing's sticking up that it will cause something not to seal. And a lot of this stuff is machine fit and might not have a gasket, so it's really important to do that. There's a really fine flat file. I guess that's about 1 inch or 1.25 inches wide. And then I just come over these flat areas to make sure there's no high spots. I'm not really looking to take anything off of them, just make sure there's no burrs or anything like that sticking up, and to make sure things are flat. This plate, I really can't feel any of these screws, but I do like to come over it just in case. This side doesn't go up against anything, but again, I don't want any burrs on that. And everything looks to be really good. Even though I put all this stuff through solvent, what I like to do at this point is take a little bit of brake clean on a clean rag and just spray everything down like that, and then just take and wipe everything off. These plugs that I took out, even though they're real clean, just give them a little spray down in there, like that and like that, just to make sure everything's clean. And then whatever's left on the rag, I just take and give everything a quick wipe off, just to make sure, even though I washed it all, that it's just all really clean. This still has the washer down in here, and this gets replaced with that kit. This bearing looked like it was in excellent condition. I surely didn't need to replace it, but you don't know that from the outside, and you just got to replace any bearings you can replace. You want to replace. This here rides in the housing. You just want to inspect this, and then in general you just want to inspect all your parts to make sure there's no serious wear. And these pump pistons look really good. So now everything's really clean and inspected and everything looks really good. I'm going to start assembling this unit back together. The other thing you see here is I like to group all like parts. I don't like all my parts in a giant pile or whatever. I lay all my parts out. That way I can see if I'm forgetting to put something in as I'm putting it back together. So now I'm going to start assembly. First thing I'm going to do is put this shaft in the housing. I did put some WD-40 on this bearing. I'm not sure if on camera, if you could see it, but there's a snap ring right there that holds that bearing on that shaft. Now this bearing's in excellent shape. I don't feel any play. It's smooth, doesn't have any growling or anything like that where there's dirt or the balls or the racers are torn up. So I'm going to reuse that bearing. This just drops into the housing like that. Next thing that goes in is this washer. Now the seal, that seal's in this kit. Rather than just rip these kits open, I like to take a razor, put a little slit in it, and that way I can kind of pluck out what I need and the rest stays organized in the kit. Here's that seal, and I also see a new snap ring in the kit, which that's nice. I don't really think it needed it, but it is there. Anytime you're putting a seal on, you want to make sure you get a good coating of oil on the lips on the seal, and that will help it slide over the shaft. You can also just take and put some oil on the shaft to make sure it slides on nice and easy. So this seal is going to be loose here until it comes down, gets to that lip. You just want to wiggle it over that lip, and this seal will press in by hand. Now that the seal's in, you want to put the snap ring on top of it. After you get that snap ring in, you just always want to look around them to make sure it's fully in the groove, and it is. And then just going to make sure that the shaft is nice and free, and it is. We'll wipe off the excess oil here. It's not really needed at this point. Also, I don't throw any parts out until things are running. So I'm just going to set that back here in the pile of used parts. Next thing I'm going to do is this arm goes through this hole. It comes from the inside out. I'm going to put the seal in for this piece here. There's 3 seals in this kit. You can see that the biggest one of these 3 is going to be my one for this arm. After that, it gets one of these 2 funky washers. This one is too small, so that's not the one. That means this one's the one. Again, this seal should just push right in with your hands. It does push in with my fingers, but it does seem like it needs a little help to get down a little further, so I'm going to get a socket and tap that in. So I have the socket here. I'm going to use this flat side since it has a little more contact with the seal, like this. I don't go crazy. This is a pretty light plastic hammer. Just needs a little tap down in. Might sound louder in the video than it really is. With this one, again, I'm going to put some oil in here on the seal. I'm also going to oil the entire shaft real good because this comes through a bushing and I want a little oil on that bushing. Even though the hydraulic fluid will fill this up, I don't want it to be dry. So you can see I have a lot more oil on this shaft and I don't want that to be dry in that bushing. This arm faces down. Okay, there you go. I had to put this in before I put the shaft in. So now I got to take it back apart. Before I put the arm in, I want to put this locking piece in here. It's kind of beveled to one direction. I just take a little smaller socket for this. I'm going to use the same socket that I put the seal in with. You see I have that in there, and it just holds the seal in. Now I'm going to put the lubricated arm in. Just push it through the seal. Comes through nice and easy. This goes down, faces down. Now I'm going to put the shaft back in with the seal and the bearing. That shaft just slides in. Then I just push the seal in with my fingers and then go back in with the snap ring. Okay, check to make sure the snap ring's down in the groove. Now I got that all together. This square piece goes on that shaft. Like that, right there. Now these slides, I want to get some oil on those. In this case, I'm just using a little bit of motor oil. Just enough to put a little film on it so nothing gets damaged when it's back together. Next thing that goes in is this rocker piece. Again, you want to inspect for wear now that everything's cleaned and it looks real good. This slides down, and then that little square in the bottom, it has to slip over top of that. I got that slid down onto that square, and again, the way this works is this rocks back and forth. And as it rocks back and forth like this, it diverts oil from one output to the other output. And that diversion gives you forward and reverse. At this point, it's time to put this bearing in. So if you look, there's a thick one and a thin one. This thin one went down here onto that plate. With this bearing, it doesn't really matter what side goes up or down, but I'm going to put it in like that. And then this upper one goes on. This already has a little bit of lube on it, so I'm not going to add any more at this point. Next thing that goes on is this washer, and then this short spring. Decide to switch over to a little hydraulic fluid. It really doesn't matter, motor oil or hydraulic fluid, when you put it all together. I'm going to put a little bit of the oil in each one of these holes, and also a little bit of oil onto the pistons. Now that I have the hydraulic fluid in that housing, I'm going to put the springs in. The big end goes down. I'm going to put some hydraulic fluid on the pistons and then set them in place. Make sure they move up and down freely. Now that I have the 5 of them in, they all move up and down freely. Internal to this piece here has a spline. It goes on the spline of the shaft. Just like that. You can see once you have it here, you can push it up and down real nice and free. It moves nice and free. There's 2 dowel pins. They go in here, like that. You can see this plate says up. You want to put it on like this when it goes on. But before you put that plate on, you want to make sure you put some oil here. I covered the entire plate there. The plate sets on there just like that. I do not believe it makes a difference which way it's turned. The cuts are the same, they're even, and these offset holes are offset the same amount on both sides. If you wanted to double check that, you could put it down here on this surface and line it up. And again, those cutouts are even regardless of which way you turn this. In this kit, there looks like there's 2 of the similar gaskets, but this one's kind of rounded and my housing's kind of rounded, so it's not this one. O-rings are cheap, so I imagine they put extra O-rings and seals in these kits so that they can just make one kit and kind of have it universal. So that's going to go in there like that. On this housing, there's a little cutout right there. And on this O-ring, there's a little tab that sits in that cutout. If you've seen any of my other videos, you know I love Loctite and I love O-ring lubricant. And this keeps these O-rings soft and swells them ever so slightly to give you a little better seal. I just take a little bit of this. It's Dow Corning 55 O-ring lubricant. If you ever want to pick this up, I use it every time. And that O-ring just sits in there just like that. Nice and easy. To get the cover on the right spot, I look for the punch mark I made on there. And on this cover, it's right there. I want to make sure I get some hydraulic oil on this shaft here. And there it is. I'm up against the springs. It's all kind of lining up. So I'm going to take 2 of these bolts and start them. Keep everything in alignment. I take each one in a little at a time, taking it down lower and lower. You just don't want to use an impact gun to bring it in and try and suck them all up. Try and suck that gap up all at once. Now that I have it down about as far as I can by hand, I'll come in with a ratchet, and I'm just, you can see I'm grabbing it way in close, taking a couple turns, couple half turns there, and just keep coming in slow. This way, if something's not right, you'll know it when you go to get close, and you're not really torquing up on it so you won't damage anything. I want to take these bolts, and I'm going to put a little never seize underneath the head here. I'm going to put a little dab of Loctite on these also. So to do that, I just get the brush, take a little lap like this around here, and just get a thin coating of it underneath the head of that bolt. Now, in case you haven't noticed, I wire wheeled all these threads to get them pretty clean. Now I'm going to take and put some blue Loctite on them. You can see how nice and easy they turn in. That's because the threads are so clean. Now I'm going to take the 2 that I used to put it together out and do the same thing with those. Those bolts are never seized and Loctited. They'll go in. What I do now is I leave all these bolts a little bit loose, and then I just want to take and spin the shaft to make sure everything's in alignment. And this shaft's tight, and I'm not really grabbing on it. You could put the key in it and put the pulley on it to spin it and use the pulley, but I'm barely touching this, and it spins real nice and free. I like to give it at least 1 full revolution, and then I know everything's in alignment, and then I can come along and start torquing these. The way I torque these is I go across, and I start out at a light torque at like 10 foot-pounds, and then I'm going to take them up to 25 foot-pounds. So here it is at 10 foot-pounds, and I just go diagonal on these. Now I'm going to take them up to 25 off camera. Alright, now that I have all these bolts torqued, I'm going to put the pump on. This is the old O-ring. I'm going to take that out. I got a new O-ring. Again, I'm going to put some O-ring grease on this one. Like that. Set it in here like that. Now, I'm going to put a little oil in here, a little this hydraulic oil for the gear to go in. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put the check ball, that's this brown plastic style check ball, into that hole right there. I'm going to do this while, go stand the pump up like this while I do it. Then I'm going to just put a drop of oil on there, and also oil around this surface. Next goes this spring on top of it. The dots face up. Got to put that gear on. I'm going to put the dot up on this gear. I'll give this all a real good coat of oil. One thing I want to point out on this housing right here, there's a little cutaway. I believe that cutaway is there, that if this O-ring goes bad, that the oil will come out there and leak out and let you know that this O-ring is bad. I did put a punch mark on this side of this housing, and I have the punch marks here on this side of the housing, so I know this goes back on this direction. And as I set it down, I have to make sure I line that spring up like that. Now that I have it down and I believe it to be lined up, I'm just going to lift it up and double check it, and it's right. So now I'm going to put one screw in to hold it. Before I put the other screw in, of course I'm going to put Loctite on it. Like that. Now I'm going to take this one out and put some Loctite on it. Then put it in. Now I have both the bolts in light, and I'll just give it a couple full rotations, And then I know everything's lined up, and now I'm going to torque these two down, and I'm going to torque these to 12 foot-pounds. And now, after it's all buttoned up, I want to make sure that I can turn the shaft freely. Nothing's bound up. Yeah, and that's real nice and free. So I know I'm good there. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change out the O-rings on these three parts. Okay, now I'm going to go back on with the scarf cut seal. Then the O-ring. Just put a little of the O-ring grease on it, like that. So that one goes back in here. I'll grab one more of these O-rings, O-ring grease, and that goes on to this one. And then the last O-ring, I'm going to put some O-ring grease on it, and it goes on here. Okay, to get this linkage on, the first thing you do is I have the shaft here, I have the release here, I have the double hose fitting here. I put this on, this piece facing up, it gets a washer, gets this Allen head fine thread bolt. Now I am going to put a little blue Loctite on this. Go center it up best I can. I'll probably have to loosen that, adjust it after the fact, but that's enough to hold it. Next thing it gets is this arm here, and these two pieces line up there. Then it gets this arm, and this arm kind of sits there like that. Gets a Teflon washer. Then it gets this arm, and this one goes here. And it takes this Teflon washer that has a step piece that goes down through it. Kind of line that sandwich up. Next thing it gets is this steel washer. It has a square in it. And that kind of goes down through there. I think what I'm going to do is put this on here first, and it all gets sandwiched together. It gets a washer on that fine thread Allen head bolt. So I lost a little video on how to get the linkage on at the very end of this video. It's no big deal. You saw most of it in the videos. Anyway, I hope you liked this video. Thank you for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. If you need any help, drop a comment below, and I'll be sure to get back to you.